Hi beautiful people, welcome and welcome back to Thrive Out Loud. Kinatanula, and as you can tell, I am absolutely stoked to be here. So, class is in session.
Okay, let's do this in 3, 2, 1. It's Thrive time.
Batung Lina. Batung, I got my very first DM requesting a topic, and thank you so much. Unfortunately, the person requested to remain anonymous, so I'll keep it just that. So, this person requested for advice when buying your first car, especially as a person who is within the civil engineering industry. And the side note to that message was the fact that they are aware that I have walked this path and I know of the specific salary bracket that I'd be able to advise them accordingly. So I'm here to serve. Dear Anonymous, this is for you. First things first, please remember to leave a massive thumbs up, subscribe, click on the bell notification, and tell a friend to come and join us for a breakfast meeting, because why the hell not? So today I'll be touching on mainly car buying tips, or car 101 from a sister to another, and maybe there'll be a part 2, I don't know, right? So as we all know, I am a qualified civil engineering professional and I graduated in 2017, and by then I had already started working the previous year. So it meant by the time I graduated, I had, give or take, about a year and a half of experience, and my career was ready to take off, set off. Pew. So please note that for purposes of this video, I'm not a financial advisor. This does not constitute as financial advice. If you do need the services of a professional and qualified financial advisor, I would recommend that you do so. Don't take my word for anything. I'm just telling you what my experience went like, right? So for purposes of this video, I'll be using figures and timelines based on the experience that I had, right? So we'll say that maybe you've just graduated, or you're about to graduate, or you're about to maybe go into in-service training, and you know that you're gonna need a set of wheels. For starters, I'd say that if you're still gonna go through your in-service training because the payment or the salary range is a bit crappy at that point, try and live as close as possible as you can to your workplace, just so you can avoid some extra costs. And especially since you don't know what your future may hold in that specific company, you don't know if they're gonna hold on to you after your in-service training, or they're gonna say thank you now and close the door in your face. Okay, so I am now gonna take it from a point where, let's say you've already done your in-service training and you've qualified. I hope this is recording because I will be so mad. Okay, great. And let's say you've now qualified and you've got your first job, and maybe your salary range or your take home is somewhere around both 15. That's the figure I'll work with. I'll work with 15,000 Rand, because as soon as I graduated and qualified and all of that was sweet and lovely, I was now at a steady 15,000 Rand take home. Of course, this was a couple of years ago, so this is why I'm comfortable with sharing it right now. I won't be a gatekeeper. We have to be honest about these things, right? So I have about 8 or so tips. They may fall on over or roll on over to 10 or even 12, because I'm not really keeping count, but I have about 8 tips for now on what to consider when buying your first car. Point number 1 is to know your budget, know what you're working with, and know how much is too much, how much is too little. I don't know if that's a thing, but a rule of thumb also suggested by Auto Trader is that you should range between 20 to 30% of your salary, your take home, not what they offered you in your contract, your take home. So if your take home is around 15,000 Rand, generally you want to play with around 3 to 4,000 Rand. I'm not sure about the exact figure, but around both 3.5, 4. I think worst case scenario will 4.5 or so. But you don't want to find yourself in a situation where you're paying 10 grand for a car and you're only left with 5,000 Rand. You haven't paid rent, you haven't bought your groceries, and you haven't sorted yourself out, and you're just here looking homeless. Okay, that's not a situation you're trying to have. You're trying to have a balanced situation where, in as much as you are taking on a new financial commitment, you're still able to keep up with the payments, and you're still able to still still maintain the lifestyle that you want even with a car in your life. Point number 2, know your lane. Yes, know your lane, know your capabilities, know what you cannot do, know what you can't do. I don't think it makes sense for a 15,000 rand salary to go and pay for a Mercedes Benz or a Beamer or a GTI, and you are left in jail eating noodles the whole month just because your friend who's a chartered accountant and their parents are guapped can do that. Okay, stay in your lane, right? So let's say there is Ntabiseng. Ntabiseng is from a well-off family where when she started working, her family had properties all over the province, so she didn't have to pay for accommodation, or she was staying at home because they've got properties everywhere. And they managed to buy her first car, and maybe they put in a large deposit, and all she had to do was pay maybe 1,000 rand a month, or only pay for the fuel, right? And then there's you, Wanabatu, where there's no one you know in Gauteng. There is a thing called black tax, and you literally have to start from scratch with accommodation and a teaspoon. You have to start with a teaspoon, like you have literally nothing to your name and you need to start from zero. Obviously, these two instances cannot be treated the same. When Ntabiseng gets a Beamer, you cannot force the Luena, you want a Beamer just because your friend has it. Know your lane, stay in it, and know your capabilities. It doesn't mean that you are going to drive a crappy car your whole entire life. It just means you know where to start, and it means you're wise enough to start it right and get off the right foot. Point number 3, do an affordability test. So normally sites like Auto Trader, I'm not sure who else, maybe your bank as well, or different banks, different dealerships, they'd be willing to run an affordability test for you. So they basically take into account how much you earn and how much you're spending, basically your expenses, and they're able to tell based on how much you have left, how much can you afford to spend on a car. And take note, just because you can afford it doesn't mean you need to buy it. Just because you can afford a Beamer, because technically, I mean, if you don't really have that much of responsibility, you've got like 13,000 rands that is basically sitting idle doing nothing, technically you can afford it, but it doesn't mean you need to buy it, because you need to still afford your own life. Just because you can afford it doesn't mean you need to buy it. Number 4, consider a second-hand or used car. And I know, all of us have this grand idea of getting a brand new car where you are literally removing all the seals, all the plastics and everything, all the bubble wraps, literally unwrapping it from a box. I know we all have that dream, but sometimes it's not attainable right at the beginning. This could be because of a lot of factors. It could be because of your affordability. It could be because maybe you don't really have much credit because you just got into the workforce, or it could be that the car you want is too expensive for your budget, or it could simply be that it's too much of a risk to get a new car, a brand new car, the type or the kind that you really, really want. Let me know if you want a separate video where I'll be getting into the tips and tricks and what you need to know when buying a second car. But essentially, you need to do your research and know what it is that you're looking for and know how best to get it. There are some really good second-hand cars. We have demo cars. We have cars that have gone on auction. We have cars that have been used but have really low mileage and are really good and can still be used. The car I got the very first time around was a second-hand car. I've driven it for the last 6-7 years and it has been a beaut. It has taken me places and there was nothing wrong with it. Number 5, please do your research. Don't buy the first car you see. I know once you get it locked in your mind that I want to buy a car, and maybe you know the model you want, maybe you don't, but for some reason the minute you start knowing the model you want, you will see that car everywhere. Don't buy the very first car you see. Don't buy the very first car that gets advertised to you or the very first car you find when you are shopping online. Make sure you do your research. Find out about how the car performs on the road. Find out about the maintenance of the car. Is it high maintenance? Is it low maintenance? Find out about the fuel consumption of the car. You don't want a car where you'll be spending more on petrol than the car itself, and also you don't want a car that will be breaking down every 2 weeks, and you don't want a car where you will literally have no parts and no way to fix it and you'll be found without a car and still be paying for it. Make sure you do your research. Number 6, don't be led by ego. You know exactly what I mean by that. When you are buying your car, you need to be strategic about it, because this is a big and bold financial move, and you cannot afford to be led by your ego or by your emotions. What I mean by this is, don't buy a car that's just good for your ego but can't really be used for your day to day. Don't get a car that's just gonna be there to call a presence when you're in the street or when you're at Groove, but it's eating away at your pocket. I'll make an example. The Beamer, the GTI, the Mercedes Benz, the Audi. I don't know these models. I don't know. Quite frankly, I couldn't really care less. But my point is, we all know these cars have a presence to them. We all know these cars have that thing to them. But when you're buying your first car, you don't need to bother yourself about having that thing on the road. For now, you're just trying to get from A to B. I mean, of course, if you're able to afford any of these cars and still be left with a chunk of money in your account, by all means, go for it. I am not talking about those. I'm talking about my humble beginners, where you're earning a mere 14, 15 grand, and where now you want a brand new Mercedes-Benz 320D Sport. Do you think it would be wise to spend 13 grand paying for a car, and that doesn't even include insurance? Do you think it would be wise? Don't be led by ego. The time will come when you have so much money to spare that you'll be able to get the car that you really want. But as your first car, you're trying to get from A to B. Number 7, consider the additional costs. Now, I don't mean to scare anyone, but the cost that you see advertised next to the car that you want, maybe it's 150,000 rands, maybe it's 200,000 rands, that is not the entire cost of getting your car. Okay, I'll explain what I mean by this. So, once you get your car, or even before you get your car, you need to take into consideration how much you'll be spending on the fuel. You need to take into consideration how much you'll be spending on insurance, how much you'll be spending on maintenance, how much you'll be spending on service, and all the other additional spices and juices that are added to it. Because all of these all around make up your overall cost on what you're spending on your car. Which takes me back to the previous point, being led by your ego. If you don't want to buy a Kia Picanto because now you cannot be that girl, you want to be a Beamer girl and you just started working, know that the Beamer is going to your money on petrol, on service, and on maintenance, and all these other charges. So these are things that you need to pay special attention to, especially if you're buying a second-hand car. But like I said, let me know if you want a separate video and I'll go into it specifically. But I'm touching on a second-hand car because the fact that it has been driven before means it may or may not be out of warranty. The fact that it has been driven before means it may be out of the maintenance years, maintenance plan, or the service plan. Those may have expired or lapsed, and this will mean that this will be an out-of-pocket cost and expense for you. So make sure that you do your research on the type of car that you're getting, keeping in mind all these additional costs that will be applicable to the overall cost of owning that car. Then the last point that I have is all about balloon payments. I know sometimes banks do this thing where they make it seem like they're working in your favor. So what they do is, if you have a car that costs 150,000 rands, right? And according to your affordability checks, they've seen that you're able to afford maybe 100,000 rands. Like, you're able to afford installments that total up to 100,000 rands, also taking into account the interest. What they will do, they'll tell you that you don't need to pay any deposit. Instead, they put what we call a balloon. So a balloon payment, it's like a deposit, but you pay it right at the end. So at the end of your term, let's say your term is 60 months or 72 months, whatever the case may be, at the very end, in order to close off your account with them, you would need to settle that 50,000 rands in cash, or you will need to now finance that 50,000 rands with them. Now, the downside of having a balloon payment is that what are the odds that you'd rock up with 50,000 rand at a garage or at a dealership, right? So the chances are you're going to finance that 50,000 rand, and this is where they make money, because there will be interest charged on that, as there has already been interest charged on the initial installment of your car. So just make sure you know what money moves you're making, and know the different ways in which banks banks are just trying to make a buck off you. Okay, I think I'll definitely have a part 2 to this video where I'll be touching on the second hand. I don't want to keep you hanging in case after watching this video you really want to know about what to keep in mind when buying a second hand car. Till then, bye.